Go ahead.
Uh-huh. Starting
Yeah.
from scratch now.
Yeah, just with your father.
Why don't you ask the first question?
Well, that just that was great what you said about your father, that you didn't know
Well,
him.
if we're starting all over, I'll start with my name and everything.
Okay.
I was given the name Victor Hugo Stein. The Victor was a name that was offered by an old maiden aunt. Not really an aunt, but an old maiden aunt close to the family, who thought that I should be named Victor Hugo. Number one, Victor, for some reason I don't know, but Hugo after my one uncle. And Victor Hugo being, of course, the name of a very famous writer, French writer who wrote Los Miserables and a number of other very famous things. I've gotten along quite well with it. It's been shortened to Vic in most cases, which I like better. But anyhow, I was born on August 1st, 1912, in Davenport, Iowa. And
August 1st?
Pardon?
Did you say August 1st?
Did I say August? I meant October 1st. At my age, I make these little mistakes. You're going to have to get used to that.
That's a big one, your birthday.
Well, at my age, I don't care when they are, as long as they don't happen too often. But anyhow, October 1st, you're right. And it was a little two-story frame home on Myrtle Street in Davenport, Iowa. And my mother, of course, was in attendance, she being one of the principal actors in this event. And my dad was there, and my grandma, Emma Franzen, and Dr. Bräunlich, who had been the family doctor for years up to that point and remained the family doctor for many years after he, a very fine old gentleman. I think very much of him. Those were the days when the doctor came around to your house. It wasn't where you had to go and get an appointment somewhere, but how in the world they ever operated, I don't know, because in those days, if they had an automobile, it was chug, 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 tug, and it'd take from his office up to our house probably about 20 minutes each way and everything, and the time that he spent with me, like when I broke my arm or various other things, how in the world it could justify his time cost ratio, I don't know. But they did, and they managed to survive. But Davenport is on the Mississippi River in Iowa, and at that time had about 55,000 people there. And across the river was Rock Island, Illinois, and Moline, Illinois, which comprised the Tri-Cities, as they were known over most of the country. My grandma Franzen was from the Zentner family, which was a German family that came over. They came over before she was born, so she was born in the United States and presumably in Iowa. And my granddad was born in Denmark and came over when he was 16 years old and got a job on a farm, and he was a handyman on the farm for a while, and then he decided he wanted to go into the city, so he went into Davenport and got a job working for a cement contractor and learned the business well enough that he finally went into business by himself and was fairly successul, I imagine, because he bought a rather nice house in the year 1900, for the family, and which remained throughout the years and still homestead for everybody that's in the Franzen Stein family. We still think about it with a great deal of love. And he and his wife Emma bore 4 children there. First one was Uncle John, then Uncle Hugo, they're uncles to me, of course, then my mother, she was third, Alma Keston, and then finally Edgar. So later on, he became more like a big brother to me than an uncle. We were very close, and what a wonderful man. He taught me a lot. I learned a lot from him. And where can we go from here now?
So your mother was born and raised in Davenport.
Davenport, yeah.
And your father?
My father was, the Stein family were originally from New Haven, Connecticut. Grandma Stein and Grandpa Stein were both born in Germany, and they migrated with their families to New Haven, Connecticut, where they were for a great many years. And Grandpa Stein was a procurer of all kinds of supplies and things for boats that came into New Haven's harbor. And of course, when he knows they're coming in, they had give him advance knowledge of what he had to collect in the way of coal and food and everything else. So when they went out again, or while they were in port, all this stuff would get onto their boats, and so they'd be ready to go again. So he had a rather important job, and I think he did quite well at that. However, it's surprising in the view of that they moved out to Davenport, and I don't know why, but they did do that, and the whole family. Aunt Lulu stayed back there. She's one of my dad's sisters, and the rest of them all came out, or a couple of them ended up in Detroit. I don't know when and where, how they got there, but they did. But that left Duke. There were 9 kids in that family, and Duke stayed in Davenport, and my dad stayed there, and Uncle Ernie and Uncle Ed, which were the 2 youngest, stayed there with them, and they had a nice house out on Division Street. At that time, it was almost a farm, way out on the edge of town, you know, and everything. And originally, they, like everybody else, had kerosene for lights and stuff like that. It was pretty primitive. I remember she had a pump on her sink, and that's where she got her water, directly out of the well, right into her sink, which was pretty convenient because most other people had their well out in the backyard and had to go out there and pump.
And that was everywhere, even in the city? It was like that
no,
everywhere?
in the city. Yeah, as far back as I can remember, they had plumbing in the city, or in the house in the city. You know, it came through the taps, much in the same manner as they did as now. And but anyhow, we had lots of fun visiting out there, and the whole Stein family got together, and they loved music. They were a very musical group. And Uncle Ed played piano, and Uncle Ernie played both the saxophone and the trumpet, and Uncle Duke played the violin, and everybody loved to sing. So Mom later was a pretty fair piano player too. She took lessons, and but it was a lot of fun. We always had a lot of fun out there. And being in the country, we kids would run around, and they didn't have a farm in the sense that they had cows and things like that, but they had a few acres out there, you know, little truck farm. Right. But anyhow, the war came, and first my Uncle Hugo was called. And later on, I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself, because I want to mention DeWitt, because that's where my younger brother Frank was born. And I sometimes amaze myself at the fact that I can still remember so many little incidents that happened in DeWitt, and I can tie it into on a matter of time, because I know Frank was born there. And he's 2.5 years younger than I am. So I was 2.5 years old when he was born. I can remember Mom rocking him and singing to him at night and going to bed. And she'd let me rock the cradle. I thought I was a real big shot. I rocked his cradle for him. But I don't know. We weren't out there too long. We were out there less than a year. And Dad had a job out there for a printer, and Mom was a housewife, of course, and took care of me and my new brother, Frank. And I thought I could remember DeWitt as being a delightful place. That's the reason I wanted to come back to it, because it was during that time that my memories of my dad are most vivid. I guess it was the kind of an ease situation of being there, because he went to work and came back, but he only had to go a couple blocks. It was a small town. I think it was probably 1,500 people.
Where was it in relation to Davenport?
It was 20 miles north of Davenport.
On the river too?
No. Well, it was on another river, but not on the Mississippi. It was inland, and it was the center for a lot of the farmers and everything came in Saturday and so forth. Actually, Davenport was the big center. Davenport in those days was considered a pretty big town, because the biggest town was Des Moines, Iowa. That was 180 miles into the state. So Davenport was the biggest town anywhere around that part of Iowa. And anyhow, that's where I can remember that Mom played the piano, and everybody sang. Aunt Jess and Uncle Herman. Aunt Jess and Uncle Herman were the neighbors out there, who we called Uncle and Aunt. They were not our uncle and aunt. They were simply neighbors, but very good friends. Excuse me. And they'd come over and we'd have a big sing fest at night. And that was fun. I remember that. I remember all those old tunes that they used to sing there, and it was interesting. Very lovely. I had a great time, as I remember it. And I'm amazed that I remember it. And this is 2.5 to 3 years old.
So you only lived there for a year?
Yeah, a little less than a year. And so then we moved back to Davenport, and then my dad went to work for the Davenport Democrat, a newspaper. And we lived in a double house there, I remember, and I remember the people next door. I can't remember their names, but they had a couple little girls, and we were friends, you know, and played together. And then I don't know where we were when my dad got called into the service. And so he had to go to Des Moines, Iowa, which was a training camp, Fort Dodge training camp. And my nose is running. Can you stop that thing?
Yeah. After you tell me, what year was it?
That was 1918. All right, now let's see, where do we leave off? My dad was...
So yeah, to start with your dad, when your dad got called to service
Mm-hmm.
in 1918?
Yeah.
And the war started... Yeah. The war started...
The war started over in Europe in 1950. And some baron or something got shot in Sarajevo, over in Bosnia, and that tipped the thing off. It was on the verge of having a big world war over there prior to that, but that's the thing that set it off. And so they were battling each other over there for years, several years, before we got involved in the thing. And we finally got involved in 1918 when the Germans sunk the Lusitania, which was supposed to be and was a peace ship, called hauled passengers and so forth. But they thought it was hauling, I can't think of the term, but any arms and so forth. And they sunk it. Well, that got us into it. That was the thing that tipped it off. It was growing to a point where we were going to have to get into it, but that caused the beginning of it. So anyhow, then there was a big call for manpower, and my father was one that was called up, and so he went to Fort Dodge. I think I mentioned this, and along in the fall of the year, the flu epidemic struck internationally. This was worse than the Black Plague, because as I mentioned earlier, 20 million people died on that, and along with the others, many of them in the camp in Fort Dodge, Iowa, died. My father among them, and I was 6 years old. I was a little too young to realize what a horrible thing that was going to be to the family, and particularly to me, because to lose a father is it bothers you all your life, because how things have changed, since I was a kid. How I would like to take him in the car, which would be an amazing thing. An automobile like this, it goes 60 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour, and looks so sleek and everything else, and stoplights and all of the other things that were radio, TV. Imagine that. All this stuff was not even thought of back in those days. So how I would like to show him all that, if it was possible to bring him back. But anyhow, after he passed away,
That's not gonna work.